I was minding my own business, finishing up my last set on bench, when a black and nebulous portal opened, and the gym warlock appeared, clad in his usual garb of roidhead skins. He looked around, and as if divining my unease about his practice, immediately centered his sinister focus on me. Before I could finish the last rep, he uttered some alchemical formula, some assuredly forbidden malediction of fitness, and the weight of the bar was suddenly increased, as if 2 more plates had been added to each side. The bar plummeted to my chest in an instant. Luckily, having dealt with his mischievous kind in the past, I anticipated the prank, and managed to roll the bar squarely down my body before it collapsed my ribcage and embarrassed me in front of the women squatting nearby. The blackened sorcerer laughed, spoke the counterspell necessary to relieve the phantom poundage, and then disappeared in an electrified cloud. From across the gym I heard the high-pitched shrieks of the 5'11" dwarves, and suddenly said a prayer for their souls. Such creatures are defenseless against the warlock's primordial sorceries and evil maxed incantations. I re-racked the plates, wiped down the bench, and moved on to my next exercise. But before I could grab the dumbbells for incline chest presses, an alarm sounded throughout the gym. My fellow gym-goers all seized up and went wide-eyed, as if stricken with a sudden palsy, and the lights of the room dimmed ominously, as if newly encased in domes of darkness. Then, from some shadow-clung recess of the room came a terrible, inhuman cry, and a stench of eons festered decay wafted above the usual scent of sweat and iron. I knew at once what had made the sound. Someone had let loose the gym ghoul. People began to flee in a frenzy, but as per gym protocol, the doors entered lockdown mode, slamming shut so as to prevent the corpse-devouring fiend from escaping. I was, of course, familiar with such procedures, and resumed my workout, knowing that the undivine ghoul would not bother me. Being a man of fresh, healthy flesh, and, more importantly, wholesome faith. Unfortunately, a gentleman who'd been doing bar-only overhead presses was not so vitally and spiritually inclined. The ghoul sensed this man's mortal weakness and pounced on him, ending the poor bastard's life before he could flee or fight back. The ever-ravenous carrion-eater then set to consuming the flesh of his victim without hesitation. The previously panicked onlookers returned to their benches and machines upon seeing that the ghoul was sated with its one victim. Not having time to watch the abominable act, I proceeded to my next exercise. Finally, putting themselves away from the smoothie bar, the gym's crypt wardens came and contained the ghoul. With little effort, they dragged the wretched thing back to the charnel gym crypts, and had the janitorial staff clean up the man's scattered remains. His membership was, of course, kept active in perpetuity, to doubtlessly incur several $1,000s in fees. The real terror of the day arose shortly after. A few minutes later, by which time the stench of steaming viscera had cleared, and the lights had lost their inhibiting dimness, the ground began to tremble, and a few plates and dumbbells were dislodged from their respective racks. There then developed a strange humidity, as if a massive dragon had gaped his maw and belched into the gym through some open window. The elevated temperature soon became intolerable, and I removed my t-shirt, the act of which drew the attention of several men, but unfortunately no women. I thought at first that some pipe or gas line had erupted beneath the gym, but then a massive fist burst through the door, displacing the guys who had come to admire my physique. Their bodies were thrown every which way, and several dumbbells landed on unsuspecting members, killing them instantly. The fist, massive, wrapped tautly in brownish-green skin, flexed its hairy knuckles for a moment, and then the hand opened, dropping a cluster of human skeletal remains and miscellaneous items onto the floor. A blood-stained badge identified the remains as those of the subterranean crew, responsible for wrangling the more aggressive gym attendees during their bouts of substance-induced fury. I dropped the weights I'd been using and staggered away, knowing I'd be no match for the hulking gym troll. With no regard for the building or those therein, the troll climbed up from the bowels of the gym. In its clumsy ascent, his head smashed through the ceiling, sending shards of plaster and glass raining down onto the frightened members. Some people began hurling plates at the troll, but these hefty missiles were largely ineffective. Hunkering down, it removed its head from the ceiling so as to identify its attackers, and then began its brutal, chaotic rampage. Barbells were repurposed as spears, lances and clubs, chains as flails, bands and jump ropes as whips. Kettlebells were lobbed haphazardly, the volley striking both troll and man alike. It was a senseless melee, and casualties mounted quickly. All the while, the staff urged people to re-rack their weights and wipe down the equipment, though they failed to replenish the wipes and sprays. Terror encumbered my movements like weighted clothes, preventing me from joining my comrades in battling the brute. An errant blow from an overzealous bodybuilder, no doubt meant for the troll, struck me in the face and I was knocked to the floor. Thankfully, my impromptu attacker was natty, and his strike dealt me no actual harm. Still, my fear kept me frozen and useless. Finally, after having bludgeoned, crushed and trampled at least a dozen members, the feral, exceedingly dim-witted titan of Tren was felled by a group of iron-hearted powerlifters, who first kneecapped the creature with a battering ram-like maneuver, utilizing a barbell loaded with nearly 1,500 pounds, and then crushing the disabled giant's massive head in the leg press machine. It was a swift, and I dare say elegant finisher to what had otherwise been a grisly and uncoordinated affair. The victors all then sat on the floor for a rest period, chewing on gummy bears, as the crowd gathered to applaud them. The troll's body was then summarily dumped back into the chthonic depths from whence it came. The troll's body was then summarily dumped back into the chthonic depths from whence it came, and its cranial debris was collected by staff and packaged to be later sold as some sort of performance enhancer. Though the troll's savage violence had terrified and shaken me, I nonetheless got up and helped clear the wreckage, so that members could continue their workouts. Fear gradually eased its grip on my heart, though my spirit did tremble a little when I happened to peer into the cavernous hole in the floor. Shadows and strange, phantasmal shapes stirred in the humid murk, which itself was faintly illuminated by a violent phosphorescence. A bellowing sound issued from the pit, perhaps the guttural groan of some time-forgotten demon of weightlifting. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard, and yet I was reminded, on some primal, pre-human level of colossal fire forms and dark, imitable voids, and nigh immeasurable lengths of Ophidian entities, whose very nature defied earth and law. I retreated from the hole before some unseen horror could spring up and snatch me golfward. A member of the staff then came over with a few wet floor signs and placed them around, effectively sealing the aperture. Not wanting to get wrapped up in any further silliness, and desperately wanting to return home and eat before my anabolic window closed, I finished my set and gathered my things. I considered using the gym showers before heading out, but heard through the doorway the telltale chorus of the gym sirens, and knew that they had breached their subaquatic containment chambers to wreak havoc upon the locker rooms. I instead gave the front desk a wave and headed out. Outwardly, the gym appeared perfectly safe. Normal, free of beasts, and primordial horrors. Such is the case with many gyms throughout the world, but those of us married to the life of lifting know better. Still, we venture forth, ghouls or Gaines goblins be damned, believing we're all gonna make it.